On a gray Monday in April of 2024, a 23-year-old woman named Mara Jenkins walked into Lowcountry Mutual Bank in Yemassee, South Carolina, with blue under all 10 fingernails. Not painted blue, stained blue. The kind of blue that does not wash off because it is already moved into the skin. She stepped up to the counter, pulled one folded check from the pocket of her canvas jacket, and slid it through the slot. $164,902.11. The teller looked at the amount first, then the company printed in the upper left corner, Lusso and Crane Denim House, Milan office, New York routing account. Then she read the memo line. 4 words. Blue from the ditch. 4 years earlier, the ditch was the part of the Jenkins place nobody mentioned unless something had gone wrong. 31 acres of low, sour ground behind the old pecan trees. Too wet for soybeans in March. Too salty for collards by July. Too narrow for big equipment. Too stubborn to drain after a storm. Mara's father called it the Drowning 31. The bank called it collateral. The county extension agent called it marginal. And Mara, who had just dropped out of a textile chemistry program her father could barely afford, told him she was going to save the farm with it. Not with corn, not with cattle, not with solar panels, not with a developer's check, with indigo. Her father, Calvin Jenkins, did not laugh when she said it. A laugh would have meant the idea was small enough to dismiss. Instead, he sat very still at the kitchen table with one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee he had not touched in 10 minutes and looked at his daughter like she had just opened a door under the house. Indigo. The word sounded old in his kitchen, older than the refrigerator, older than the bank letters stacked beside the bread box, older than the county road that had been widened twice and still flooded at the same bend. Calvin was 56 years old, a black farmer in Beaufort County with knees that clicked when he stood, and a face that looked carved from heat, worry, and marine wind. His family had held those acres since his grandfather bought the first section after the war, and every generation after that had spent its life proving the land could still feed somebody. Calvin had tried vegetables. He had tried soybeans. He had tried a contract crop he was told would be the future of specialty agriculture, right before the buyer folded and left him with 2 warehouses of produce nobody wanted. The debt left behind was not theoretical. It had a payment schedule. It had late fees. It had a bank officer with polished shoes who said, "Options," the way other men said, "storm." And his daughter wanted to plant dye. Mara had come home from school in 2020, 3 months into a world that seemed to be closing every door at once. Her classes had moved online. Her campus job disappeared. The scholarship that had made the second year possible became a maybe, then a later, then nothing. She told her father she was not going back. He said, "You are not throwing away school to come home and watch this place drown." She said, "School was teaching me how to make color cheaper." He stared at her. She looked down at the table because the next sentence felt cruel even before it left her mouth. I want to make it matter more. That was the sentence that broke the room. Calvin pushed his chair back. More than what? She did not answer. More than rent? More than diesel? More than the loan I took out so you could sit in a lab and learn what I never got to learn? Daddy. No. You want to talk about more? I'll show you more. He reached to the sideboard and lifted the envelope the bank had sent 2 days earlier. He did not open it. He had opened it enough times. $164,000. That is what more looks like. That is what stands between us and losing land my father died trying to hold. Mara's eyes did not move from the envelope. The ditch can grow indigo, she said. Calvin blinked once. The ditch can grow mosquitoes. It already grows the wrong things because we keep trying to make it be clean land. It isn't clean land. It's wet. It's mineral. It's salty in patches. It's stressed. That is why it might work. Might. Yes. Might does not pay a note. No, but soybeans didn't either. He did not shout. Shouting would have been easier. He only stood up, took the bank envelope with him, and walked out through the back door into the yard. For 2 days he did not bring up Indigo. For 2 days Mara did not bring up school. On the 3rd morning she found a shovel leaning against the back steps. Beside it was a pair of cracked rubber boots that had belonged to her grandmother. A note was tucked inside one boot. If you are going to be wrong, do it before the next rain. That was Calvin's blessing. It was also a warning. The ditch did not want to be rescued. It had been cut in the 1940s by men trying to make lowland behave like upland. The drainage line ran crooked, half-choked by sedge, bottle glass, rusted wire, and roots thick enough to hold a shovel hostage. In hard rain, water backed up and spread over the ground like a quiet accusation. Mara spent the first month digging out debris and flagging the places where salt burned white at the edges of puddles. She ordered soil tests she could barely afford. She read old papers on plant stress, dye precursors, fermentation, leaf timing, alkaline vats. But the thing that changed everything was not online. It was in a cedar trunk under the back bedroom window. Her grandmother had kept quilts there, church hats, a broken fan, a stack of paper-wrapped photographs. At the bottom, beneath a yellowed tablecloth, Mara found a ledger wrapped in flour sack cotton and tied with blue thread. The cover had no title. Inside, in a small, slanted hand, were 40 years of notes written by her great-grandmother, Inez Jenkins. Not recipes, not memories. Field records. June 18th, 1949. Low patch near ditch gives strongest leaf after salt wind. August 2nd, 1951. Do not cut after 3 days' rain. Blue turns weak and gray. September 7th, 1956. Grandchild spilled lime into vat and spoiled batch. Color came back after 2 nights warm. March 11th, 1962. Land keeps the color if you do not rush it. Mara sat on the floor with the ledger open on her knees until her legs went numb. The entries were not sentimental. That is what made them feel holy. Inez had written like someone leaving instructions for a person she was not sure would ever arrive. Leaf weight, moon phase, water level, smell of the vat, time from cutting to bruising, weather before harvest, which ditch bank gave the darkest paste, which wind ruined everything. Mara knew the official family story. Inez had grown herbs, made soap, dyed quilts, and sold little things at market. The family called it Grandma Inez's color work, the way families soften genius when they do not know where to put it. But the ledger was not hobby work. It was chemistry done without a lab, agronomy without a department, a whole blue economy pressed between pages. That night Mara left the ledger on the kitchen table. Calvin came in after dark, washed his hands, saw it, and stopped. He did not ask where she found it. He touched the blue thread around the cover. "I thought Mama burned all that." "Why would she burn it?" "Because Inez died owing money to everybody. Because folks said she wasted time on color when she should have been growing food. Because some things hurt people even when they love them." Mara turned a page. "Did you know she kept records like this?" Calvin shook his head. "My mother said Inez had a stubbornness problem." Mara looked up. "What if it wasn't a problem?" He did not answer. Morning, Calvin took the tractor as close as the ground would allow and dropped a load of cypress boards by the ditch. "For your vats," he said. "They need to be food safe." "They were cut from my uncle's barn loft, never treated, been drying 40 years. Don't waste them." Then he walked away before she could thank him. The first crop looked like a mistake. Indigo does not announce itself. It does not stand in a field like corn, tall and obvious, declaring value from the road. It grows modestly, leafy, low, almost shy. Neighbors slowed their trucks and looked. Some asked if she was planting beans. Some asked if it was hemp. One man at the feed store told Calvin his daughter had invented the most expensive weed patch in the county. Calvin came home with the joke still stuck to him. Mara saw it before he said anything. "What did they say?" "Nothing worth repeating." "Then don't repeat it." He nodded, but he repeated it inside himself for weeks. By late summer, the plants were ready. Mara cut the first test batch by hand before sunrise because Inez's ledger had said hot leaves lie. She packed them into one cypress vat, weighed them down with river stones, and covered them with warm water. For 12 hours, nothing happened. For 16 hours, nothing happened. 1 hours, the vat began to smell like wet grass and old pennies. At 24, the liquid turned a strange greenish tea. At 28, Mara pulled the leaves, added lime, and began to beat air into the vat with a wooden paddle until her shoulders burned. Foam climbed the surface. Blue appeared and vanished. Blue returned. Not bright, not clean, not the fake royal blue of a plastic bottle. This was deeper, moodier. A blue with a green shadow under it, like storm water in a ditch before dark. She drained the liquid through cloth, let the pigment settle, poured off the water, and scraped the paste into shallow trays. When it dried, the first cake fit in her palm. 27 hours of labor. One small blue brick. Worth almost nothing by commodity logic. Synthetic indigo was cheap. Industrial buyers purchased color by uniformity, by tonnage, by repeatable formula. Mara could not compete with that. She knew it better than anyone because school had taught her exactly how cheap blue could become when the goal was sameness. So she did not sell sameness. She photographed the cake on Inez's ledger and posted it under an account she called Ditch Blue Notes. No face, no influencer smile, no farm girl performance. Only evidence. A salt map of the field. A close shot of her blue-stained thumb. The cypress vat with foam collapsing in the morning light. Strip of cotton dyed once, twice, 4 times, each pass darker and stranger. Short captions with batch numbers, leaf age, weather, water source, and the line from Inez's notebook that matched the day. Most people did not notice. A few did. Natural dyers, textile historians, small denim makers, fiber artists who spoke about color the way some people speak about wine. Not blue. Undertone, strike, bloom, fastness, story, place. By the end of the first year, she had 612 followers and no profit. At the end of the second, she had 4,800 followers, 2 ruined vats, a strained wrist, and 1 buyer in Asheville who paid more for 6 ounces of pigment than a broker had offered for an entire truckload of soybeans. It still was not enough. The bank did not care about undertone. The bank did not care that one dyer in Oregon cried when her cloth came out the color of a thunderhead. The bank did not care that Mara had proved the ditch could produce something no other field could copy. The bank cared about Tuesday. Payments were due on Tuesdays, not someday, not almost, not beautiful. Tuesday. The darkest point came after a storm with no name. It was not a hurricane. Hurricanes get attention. Hurricanes get maps and warnings and men in rain jackets standing sideways on television. This was only rain. 3 days of it. The ditch rose inch by inch until the field disappeared. The plants bent under brown water. The vats floated inside the shed, knocked against one another, and split their lids. 1 tray of drying pigment dissolved into a blue smear across the floor. Mara stood in the shed after the water fell, looking at the stain. A whole month of work had become a ghost on concrete. Calvin found her there. She had not cried when the field flooded. She had not cried when the first vat went sour. She had not cried when a buyer returned a batch and said the color was too alive for their product line. But she cried over the floor. Not loudly. That made it worse. Calvin stood in the doorway and watched his daughter press both hands over her mouth like she was trying to keep the sound from leaving her body. He wanted to tell her it was just pigment. He knew better. He looked at the blue stain running toward the drain. For the first time, he understood that she had not been playing with color. She had been trying to build a way out small enough to hold in her hands. That night he opened the bank envelope himself and set it on the table. "We have 90 days, he said. Look up. Before what? Before they start moving from letters to action. She nodded once. Then she said the sentence he had been afraid of for 4 years. Maybe I should have stayed in school. Calvin sat across from her. No. She laughed once, bitterly. You don't get to say that now. I do, he said. Because I was wrong first. That made her look at him. He slid Inez's ledger across the table. This land has been trying to tell us what it can do longer than I've been alive. I called it drowning because I only knew how to ask dry land questions. He tapped the cover. She knew different. You knew different. Mara looked at the ledger, then at his hand. And if different doesn't work? Calvin took a long breath. Then we lose it, having told the truth. The next morning he called a man named Silas Brown. Silas was 71, a retired boat builder with hands like root systems and a memory full of things nobody had written down. His mother had dyed fishing nets and work shirts with Inez when they were girls. He remembered the smell of the vats. He remembered the old rhythm of beating air into the liquid. He remembered a sentence his mother used to say when the blue would not settle. You have to wake it up, then leave it alone. Silas came by with a crooked walking stick and insulted Mara's paddle within 10 seconds. Too light, he said. It works. It splashes. It beats air. It scares the vat. He carved her a heavier paddle from black gum wood. He showed her how to strike the surface and fold air down, not whip it like egg whites. He taught her to listen for the change in sound when the liquid thickened. He made Calvin fix the shed floor so trays sat higher than floodwater. And he told Mara something that was not in the ledger. Inez never sold the best blue by weight, he said. How did she sell it? By cloth. That sentence became the turn. Mara stopped trying to sell pigment as product. She started selling proof. She bought unbleached American cotton twill in small runs, cut it into numbered panels, dyed each panel herself using a batch trace from field to vat to cloth. She recorded every step. She made a small paper tag for each piece with the exact harvest location. Ditch Bank East, Salt Edge, Second Cut, Warm Night, 4 dips, batch 28. Then she mailed 5 panels to 5 people who had been watching quietly for months. One went to a natural dye scholar in North Carolina. One to a Japanese denim collector in Los Angeles. One to a textile buyer in New York. One to a small museum curator in Charleston. And one, because she was tired enough to become brave, went to Luso and Crane Denim House. She did not expect an answer. For 16 days, none came. On day 17, an email arrived with no greeting. Can you repeat this color across 40 yards? Mara stared at the screen. Then she wrote back the truth. No, not exactly. She thought that would end it. Instead, the reply came 8 minutes later. "Good. Can you prove why?" That was the first question anyone from the outside had asked correctly. The buyer's name was Elena Ricci. She flew into Savannah in a white shirt that probably cost more than Mara's seed order, and shoes that were immediately wrong for the field. Mara liked her because she did not pretend otherwise. Elena stood at the edge of the ditch in borrowed rubber boots, looking at the plants, the salt crust, the cypress vats, the ledger under glass in the shed, the blue crescents under Mara's fingernails. "This is not scalable," she said. Calvin stiffened. Mara did not. "No," she said. "That is the point." Elena smiled slightly. Then Mara showed her 2 pieces of cloth. The first was dyed with commercial natural indigo purchased from a supplier. The second was ditch blue, batch 31. In the shade, both were blue. In the sun, they separated. The commercial cloth went flat and handsome. Batch 31 deepened. The green undertone opened like marsh grass under water. The surface did not look painted. It looked grown. Elena held both pieces for a long time. "What causes that?" Mara could have given the simple answer: soil, salt, stress, water, fermentation, time. Instead, she gave the true one. "I do not think it is one thing. I think it is the field refusing to become a factory." Elena looked at the cloth again. For the first time since she arrived, she did not look like a buyer. She looked like a person who had found a door. The contract took 6 weeks. Lawyers wanted terms. The bank wanted dates. Calvin wanted to know why a company in Milan needed so much paperwork to buy blue dirt from South Carolina. Mara wanted to know whether she could produce 40 yards without destroying the thing that made it valuable. She nearly said no. Then she read Inez's ledger again. "Land keeps the color if you do not rush it." So she wrote one condition into the contract: no blended batches. Each length of cloth would carry its harvest map, vat number, and field note. If the color shifted, the shift stayed. If a panel was lighter, it would not be corrected. If rain changed the batch, rain would be part of the batch. Lusso and Crane accepted. The work that followed did not feel like success. Success sounds clean when people tell it later. In real time, it smelled like fermentation and wet leaves. It looked like Mara waking before dawn with a headlamp, Calvin carrying bundles from the field, Silas sitting by the shed door telling her the vat sounded sleepy. Cloth hanging from lines between pecan trees. Blue water under their boots. Fingers cracked at the knuckles. Mosquitoes rising in the dusk. Inez's ledger wrapped in plastic when storms came. The 40 yards took 73 days. The final invoice was larger than any number Mara had ever typed into a document. $164,902.11. A number so close to the debt it felt rude to say aloud. When the check arrived, Mara did not open it alone. She waited until Calvin came in from the field. His shirt was soaked through. His hat had a blue thumbprint on the brim from where she had borrowed it and forgotten what was on her hands. He read the amount twice. Then he sat down in the kitchen chair he had sat in the night she said Indigo. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Calvin said, "Your great-grandmother would have hated the email part." Mara laughed. Then she cried. This time he did not stand in the doorway. He crossed the room and held her. On the Monday she took the check to the bank, the teller asked what kind of business Lusso and Crane was. Mara said, "Clothes." The teller looked at the memo line again. "Blue from the ditch." "What does that mean?" Mara looked down at her stained fingers. "It means the land was not useless." The mortgage release came 3 weeks later. Calvin framed a copy not because he trusted paper, but because he wanted to see the bank's stamp inside his own house and not feel small. Mara framed something else. A page from Inez's ledger. March 11th, 1962. Land keeps the color if you do not rush it. People later tried to make the story simple. A young woman saved a farm with Indigo. A luxury brand discovered a rural maker. A worthless field produced a miracle crop. None of that was exactly true. The ditch did not become valuable because it changed. It became valuable because someone finally stopped asking it to be something else. They stopped asking it to be something else. The market had measured the field by what could be extracted quickly, blended easily, priced cheaply, and repeated without memory. Mara measured it by what could only happen there. The salt stress, the ditch water, the cypress vats, the old notes, the hands that listened, the patience to let color become itself instead of forcing it to match a chart. That was the real product, not pigment. Proof. Proof that small is not the same as weak. Proof that old knowledge is not dead just because the market stopped pricing it. Proof that a place can carry a value no spreadsheet sees until a human being learns how to translate it. The rigid system wanted uniform blue by the ton. The ditch gave them 40 yards of color no factory could repeat. And somewhere in Beaufort County, after a hard rain where the low field still holds water longer than it should, indigo leaves lift their faces out of the mud and begin again. Not useful by the old definition. Not useless anymore.